mind if I leave that by? Let's see here. Where is it? Oh, hi. I didn't see her there. Well, you see, I've been currently, packing up for a move. And I have to say, it's been misplacing many things. Been rather frustrating, if I'm sure you can tell. Now, I've been wondering, after my first video, I've been thinking about what else am I going to do for you? And the question is, I don't know. So, I've been thinking, I only have one, maybe two wretched regiments to throw at each other, but that gets boring. So, I'm thinking about making something a little bit new. Here they are.
I'm going to be creating some Grogs from the Slug's Lament cult, using the Walls of the Empire firing line kit from Wargames Factory. I figured this would be the perfect baseline for some of the most competent marksmen insist. And no, that isn't a jest or jab. These Grogs can land a hit on a 4-up, 3-up if they stand still, and actually volley fire. But Carver, how are you going to make them look turnipy? Well, like any other root vegetable enthusiast, I'm going to be using green stuff and sculpting tools. This isn't going to be fancy. It's turnip after all. Alright, now before we do any hobbying, we need to do the most important step of all. Removing our cute little posies. Alright. Come on! Ah! Okay, now for the next one. Okay. I think I'm good. So the first thing that struck me with this kit is most of the poses are the same. The only deviation being that the arms and the stuffy upright posture the gun line has. I would have to find some way to make this standing army, well, stand out. I figured the pose would be fine, given the Grogs are mostly a disciplined sort. They aren't going to have the same frantic energy that some untrained rabble would have. They stand, they shoot, and they begrudgingly only move 1 inch back, instead of 2 when running. My first instinct was to add some medals to the mold card. This is the quote-unquote free unit that escorts the top and slinks into the battlefield in the 3rd round. Because let's be honest, if you're going to be dragging along a slug of a general, the least you can expect is a shiny medal for your efforts. Application was simple. Grab the ribbon with a pair of tweezers, and then glue it on, then just stick it right in their chest. And for my next step, I'm going to be making those little tiny beaky helmets that all the turnips are prone to have. As I'm sure you can see, I get my tools out, lay them out all neat and pretty, and then I wet my fingers. This is very important because if you have sticky fingers, then, well, the beaks, they're going to be sticking to your fingers instead of the model, which is annoying! But you know what's even more annoying? Having a head and not a neck to rest on. So that's why I'm going to be taking a little, even smaller piece of green stuff and then just gently dabbing it into place. Now, while forming your neck, don't be afraid to be like a slasher villain and give your neck a few good stabs with your tools. Now, if it gets a little bit too sticky, be sure to dab it in your water just to make that surface tension sort of like ease up. Is there a proper term for it? I don't know. I guess I'm just not that smart. I mean, I do have a pumpkin for a head. There's not much in here. So for the next steps, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing basing, yes, but these are going to be a few different techniques I wanted to try out. You know, because I'm making a video, and I kind of need to pad this out. So, for the first step, I'm taking some green stuff and just slowly molding it over the little tiny annoying platform that the minis are sculpted with. Taking a few extra moments to really just stab and sculpt in that organic texture. Once again, stabbing is your friend, especially with Turnip. Don't want to waste green stuff? Hey, I can't blame you, that's expensive. And unless you live in a place where it's readily available, it could take some time to get. So, here's what I'm going to suggest. Get some hot glue. And because you want to rush like me, be sure to put on the highest temperature that you've got, to help melt that plastic glue even quicker. And I feel like I should warn you, as a responsible adult, if you are using hot glue, be careful, you can burn yourself. Really, I'm not joking here, you really can burn yourself. So be sure not to touch the nozzle. There's no art or high science to this, just really glob it on there. If you make sure just really put the pencil down as far as it'll go and use the tip to gently push the glue on top of it. Just sort of smooth it out a bit. You can't go wrong. And as an added bonus, if you happen to pull the hot glue when it's still drying, you get these long, spindly tendrils, which you can use for roots. Now, if you want more of a sandy kind of base, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna take a big tub of baking powder and some super glue, typically the thinner, the gel kind. Now, I think it's very important to say, always wear gloves for this. You will thank yourself later for doing this, because super glue sticks to your skin. If rumors are true, apparently super glue was originally designed as liquid stitches. Who would have guessed? But that does explain why it tends to stick to your oh-so-supple skin. More than the model. The process is simple. Just simply apply super glue to the base, then put the base into your bucket of your sandiest substrate. Now, do not be afraid to work in layers. The good thing about super glue and baking soda is it hardens immediately, on contact even. So if you want to add more sand, feel free to do so. Feel free to experiment. Heck, go crazy with it. Who's gonna stop you? I know I'm not. I'm just some rando on YouTube. Now that our Grogs are safely bound to their bases, we can go on to the next step, adding color. Now obviously I need to start with a black primer, first step, and then next I like to get a little bit of dark silver, like lead belcher, on a dry brush. Then I lightly brush the black primer over where the metal bits are gonna be. The reason I enjoy this technique is because it darkens the metal, allowing me a nice dark base coat to work up to. If I want to have a little bit of highlight shades. Is that what they call it? Now in this next step, I'm going to be taking a much brighter silver, like this Pro Acrylic right here. And what I like to do is I like to do a quick and dirty mix-up. Just take a little bit of lead belcher and a little bit of bright silver, blend them together so they sort of make a mid-tone. This would be a nice step up from that dark tone that we started with. After blending the two paints together, I take the pre-painted minis I did with the darker tone, and I apply this slightly brighter silver on top of it, or typically where the higher points are going to be. It's a relatively simple process. Now the good thing with dry brushing is, if your models have texture on them, let's say like a fruity and lumpy grog, the dry brush does most of the work. Just watch. Now, to blend that dark tone and mid-tone together, I'm going to be doing a little bit of shading. And when I say a little bit, I'm just going to pour a bunch of Agrax Earth Shade on this. Because, let's face it, it's Turnip. They're going to be dirty and grimy anyway. Now for the coat. We're thinking about making this a little bit dirtier, a little bit grimier, a little bit darker. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be taking some Citadel Mornfang Brown as a base, and I'm going to be mixing it with Army Painter's Lava Orange for that orange color. Mixing it's more of an art than a science, but I'd like to say maybe a 1-to-1 mix, if you have to have a good number. I prefer to try and paint the lower parts of the model first. For example, like this coat. Like, I'm going to be painting the coat first, then the belts, then, I don't know, maybe something goes on top of the belt, like the ribbon. If you make a mistake, don't worry about it. You have a few options. You can either wet your brush and just sop up the fresh paint, or you can just paint over it, especially with stuff like metal. You can easily dry brush over with metal tone, and it should cover up whatever's underneath it. Heck, if you're going with a dirty paint scheme like this, you could just say that's rust. These pants are going to have no frills. I chose to use a dark opaque green, and I'm just going to be stippling it on with the dirtiest, most abused dry brush that I have. Now for annoyingly small details like this, I would recommend that you take your time. If at all possible, and if there's straight enough lines, be sure to take your fine brush and slowly drag it down along the belt. Okay, I'm going to be doing something a little bit quick and dirty for these candles. Now, you see that contrast paint that I have right there? Margot's purple, if I understand correctly. I'm just going to be taking a small little bit on the brush and just like glob it on there. Now, for the belt around the pith helmet, I'm going to be using the exact same method that I used for the belts. Only in this time, instead of using brown, I'm going to be using Pallid Witch Flesh. That's a very off-white by Citadel. And I'm going to be just gently touching my tip against the belt to try and, pick it out. And be sure to use a very light touch, like picking the leeches out of your musket. And as any experienced toff knows, if you're too heavy-handed with handling leeches, they squish and gush all over the rifle. But if you're too light-touched, then they'll just wiggle out of your fingers, then they'll start biting you. Once again, I'm going to be adding more muck and grime to this, because let's face it, it's Turnip after all. They're going to be muddy, they're going to be gross, they're going to be rusty. Oh, you're going to like this next step. Now this is what I use for all of my rust effects. Dirty Down Rust and Rub and Buff. Now, one thing that I should say about Dirty Down Rust is it's very temperamental. So what is not pictured here is the 5 to 10 minutes of rapidly shaking it and, giving it a nice warm bath afterwards, to help it relax. However, after that arduous process, you'll be rewarded with an easy application and wonderful effects. Just look at the effects now, and this is before it even dried. As you can see, the application's easy. Just take the most grimy brush you have, dunk it in, and just gently stipple it on. You don't need to be neat, you don't need to be tidy. Heck, it would behoove you to be as messy as possible. And the best part of Dirty Down is, you can easily clean it up with water, even after it dries. Now, for the Rub and Buff, you need to use a brush you do not care about. Because it's oil-based, it will chew through your good brushes. Once again, application is relatively easy for Urban Bug. One thing that I will say, however, is less is more. So what you want to do before you apply that paint to any part of your miniature is to dry brush a lot of it off. And as I'm sure you can see me, just gently stipple onto the places where you want the damage to go. This works perfect for edges that typically catch onto rough surfaces like bayonets or edges of tanks, but let's be honest, this is Turnip, not Swill. So, you're not going to see many tanks. So, just focus on bayonets. Now, the Dirty Down Rust is fabulous on its own. However, if you want to add just a little bit more pop, what you can do is you can take some light browns and some oranges and stipple it on top of the rustiest, grimiest parts of the helmets. Don't be afraid to mix the two. Blending will only have more organic outcomes. Okay, so you remember all those arrows I made? Well, that was a secret ingredient I'm going to use for my Old Guard. Now, the Old Guard is just the most beaten up, brutalized, and just flat out abused member of the army. They do come out on the board with 6 panic, so what better way to simulate that than having a few arrows sticking out of them? Sadly, I don't have a crossbow small enough, or the upper body strength to load it, so I kinda need to drill some pilot holes to get these arrows stuck into these Old Guard. Add a little bit of super glue, stick them in, and voila, you're done! But if you want to take this gore to the next level, just stay tuned. Okay, so I want to try something a little bit eye-catching for my base. Now look, it's cyst, so there's gonna be tons of muck, tons of grime, but how do you simulate that? I'm going to be using a little bit of resin. So, first off, I'm going to mix it all up, then I'm going to be mixing in a hardener. Mix for about 2 or 3 minutes for each step, and then when I'm done with that, I'm going to be adding a secret ingredient, acrylic ink. As you can see, it's a bright neon color, so it's going to be very eye-catching. So I'm going to be adding just like 1, maybe 6 drops. And I'm just going to be just stirring it in. Once again, stirring it in for 2 to 3 minutes to really get it all mixed in and solid. Oh yeah, look at that slimy consistency. That means you know it's good. Okay, so to apply the slime, I'm going to be taking my mixing stick and just pouring it onto the model itself. Slowly tilting it from left to right and, back to center so I can actually maneuver the slime around. A little dab will do you, because trust me, this will spread. And here you can see the final result. As I'm sure you can see, it's spread a lot. If I was smarter, I could have actually used some mold, some clay, or maybe some aluminum foil ventilation tape to keep it from spreading out onto the table. Now look, I'm not the first schmuck online who uses Oohoo glue to make drool or slime, but it's a simple process that not many people use. Now look, this is a simple enough process, but the learning curve can be a little bit daunting. The hardest part is finding a contact point for the Oohoo glue to first cling onto. Then you need to find another edge or point on the base to act as an anchor point. Now, after that, it's a simple process of letting the glue dry. Then I take some blood from the blood god from Citadel, and I just gently drag it along the strands of ooey gooey Oohoo glue. This technical paint already has a very good simulation of the consistency of congealed blood. So it's kind of idiot-proof, which is perfect, because I play Turnip. As is tradition in videos like these, I'd like to take a moment to say that I'm deeply enjoying this silly little root vegetable game. Just the sheer creativity that you have to create whatever the heck you want, and cover it in grime. I love it. Sadly, however, this video took much longer than intended to make than expected. Between moving, switching jobs, the Nova Open, consistently driving between my old and new home to drag all my little toys and tools up to my new haunt, the video production has screeched to a halt. I'm now in a much more populated area, filled with other wargame enthusiasts. So at least this will goad me into making more projects, and maybe dragging a few players to my lair to play a game of Turnip. Oh! In other news, it seems like that madman Max Fitzgerald himself has released his Kickstarter for the Shattered Lands expansion. Needless to say, I'll be supporting it, especially with how much Gabby and I favor the cavalry units. Hopefully one of the new cults leans into that type. I'll be adding a link to the video and in the description bar so you can throw your money at the creator. And I know I don't say this enough, but thank you for the support and your time for watching my silly little videos. Take care.